What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm joined by two of the greats in this industry, Jurg and Dane. Fellas, how are we this week?
Oh, Chris, come on now. You already know how it goes. We're doing good. We're feeling good. Biggest game of the young year so far just happened this past weekend. Quite the game, quite the halftime, quite everything. Ah, it, it's so good. And now, with every closing of one door, it breaks open a new one, and there's still plenty for us to talk about on the show. So I'm excited.
I'm doing good. Got nothing going on. Cashed out on the Super Bowl this weekend. That was some good news. Other than that, I got nothing.
That's nice. That's nice. Oh, I mean, at least you won money, right? That's the most important thing
Yeah.
here. But yeah, football has come and gone. Last week, biggest game of the year, the Super Bowl. And it was fun. It was really fun. I thought it was, spoiler alert, a strong game compared to most Super Bowls. I think a good conglomerate of commercials this year. I actually like the commercials this year. They were actually pretty creative. One in particular stood out, but this isn't a commercial review podcast. We review sports. So the rundown for this week, Jurg has some NHL news he wants to talk about. After that, we're gonna actually review the Super Bowl game because that's what we do. And then after that, we will be discussing the coaching hirings that have occurred in the NFL because a bunch of coaches have been hired over the past few weeks. But we wanted to let it, we wanted it to let it marinate first and like kind of let the dust settle before we actually talk about it. So that's what we did. And to our benefit, it paid off because there's a lot of stuff to talk about, which means we're probably going to go an hour for this episode. Sorry, guys, but you're going to have to listen to us just spew nonsense. All right. So, as always, Jurg, our hockey prince, do what you do best. Start us off. What do you got for us, bud?
It's just a quick little trade that I have here. So, boys, the NBA trade deadline that, of course, 2 weeks ago, these two fine gentlemen here on a podcast that I was unable to be a part of broke down some potential teams and candidates that they foresaw potentially being traded last week. And of course, last week we broke down all that news. And of course, if you want to hear our exact thoughts on all those big time trades, you got to go back and listen to last week's episode. So pause this, go listen to last week if you didn't, and then come back to this episode to hear a little bit of my thoughts on the upcoming, eventually, NHL trade deadline. So the NHL trade deadline happens in March. So obviously, a good little while. It's really going to be a legitimate amount of time before we get to serious discussions. But over the next couple of weeks, if trades do happen, I want to talk about them here on the pod a little bit. But what I also want to do eventually is start to dive into some of the finer details. What we could see happen, similar to what the boys did with the NBA. I want to do with the NHL, and who knows, maybe just maybe do I bring someone along for the ride on those episodes? But that's a wait and see. That's a tease, as we call it in the business, boys. That's
Okay.
for a later date. That's called foreshadowing. But all that aside, let's get to the actual trade that has happened this past week in the NHL. Funnily enough, on Valentine's Day, February 14th, Tyler Toffoli of the, well, now former Montreal Canadiens, was traded to the Calgary Flames in exchange for Tyler Pitlick, Emil Heineman, a first round pick in this year's draft, and a fifth round pick in next year's draft. Now, quick breakdown on the trade for both sides because I'm just going to keep it very simple here. Tyler Toffoli has been a guy who the last couple seasons you could say has been a breath of fresh air actually for Montreal. When he was first signed, a lot of people, they thought it was a good enough signing. They didn't know how much it would really make a difference for the Canadiens because at that point they weren't necessarily viewed as a consistent playoff team. But Toffoli in year one, which was the lockout constrained season where it was different divisions and all that, provided a great goal scoring, a good veteran presence for a young Canadians team that, as we saw later in that year, they made the Stanley Cup final. And he was a good piece on that team, a key contributor, even before that when he was in Vancouver. So funny enough, actually, this is the third Canadian team he's going to be playing on within the last 2 years or so, which is to me is just hilarious. But Toffoli played an important part of Vancouver's little run that they had in the bubble, and then with Montreal being to the Stanley Cup final, and now he finds himself being traded to the Calgary Flames, who have been surprising people, particularly myself here, with how good they've performed this season. They definitely feel that this is the time to go. I wouldn't necessarily call it all in. Yes, they traded a first round pick, but they want to make a legitimate push with this team, because I think in the eyes of a lot of people, the Western Conference, more so compared to the East, is wide open in regards to who could come out the West. So for the Calgary Flames side of this, to get back to Foley, this is a guy who could be a 20 to 30 goal scorer, is a veteran. He's actually played with a good amount of the players on this Flames team, funny enough. He has history with Sean Monahan. He has history with Trevor Lewis, who's on the team, who the two of them were back in Los Angeles together. And he has history with Jacob Markstrom. Jacob Markstrom was on that very same Vancouver Canucks team that Tyler Toffoli was a part of. So a guy who immediately adds a scoring boost to the top six. They needed to improve the top six in Calgary, excuse me, and he's a great ad. He'll easily go into the second line that they have going on there in Calgary. Allows Blake Coleman to be pushed down to the third line, and just it bolsters that third line more, especially come playoff time, because as anyone knows, playoff time is important, and Coleman played a very key contribution to the Stanley Cup, back-to-back Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning in their last two runs, especially this past year, where that third line of Gord, Goudreau, and Coleman just was fire throughout the playoffs. Absolutely. So you move a guy like Coleman to your third line, make the third line stronger. You get Toffoli, who can help beef up that top six. That was a really good move by Calgary. Again, a team I didn't have a lot of expectations for. I've been calling for Calgary to kind of blow it up the last year or two. They clearly have not yet. Now, still an interesting situation. Some contracts coming up. Perhaps a piece or two of this team could be traded. Rumors abound. But right now, Calgary is playing at a high level. They are towards the top. If not, I believe the top team in their division, or no, that might actually still be Vegas, but top two in their division. That's all you can ask for going into this time of year and getting ready to make that stretch run. Big time for them. Montreal, as I discussed weeks back when I did teams that disappointed me this season / surprised me, the Montreal Canadiens are a tire fire, to say the least. They have taken the mantle from the Buffalo Sabres of being the absolute worst organization in the league by a country mile. The Canadiens, as a update from last time I spoke with them, they are 8-37 and 8-33 and 7. They have 8 wins, 33 regulation losses, 7 overtime losses. In the point standings, they only have 23 points. The next team that's worse, I mean, granted, Arizona is actually still bad. Arizona has 28, Montreal has 23. Apologies if I misspoke, but yeah, those two teams are not good. But Montreal, especially after last year's run, just losing everything, they're deciding to blow it up. Kent Hughes making a trade here, I think, was for the best. You get a first-round pick back. You get a prospect in Heidemann, who he has not yet played in North America. He's actually still in the Swedish Hockey League since he's been drafted a couple years back by the Florida Panthers. The kid could become a piece for the future. Who knows? He was a second-round pick after all. We'll see. I think this should be his last year in the SHL. I want to say he's going to transition over to North America next year. Not saying that with like absolute certainty, because sometimes when these kids go back, I kind of lose a little bit of the timeline with them. But I would have to imagine that Montreal would prefer if he could come over back to the States next season and potentially play a role in a team that's straight up rebuilding. Like if we're being completely honest here, Montreal is in a full rebuild, as they hired a new coach as well, and Martin St. Louis, former NHL great, a top tier player, scorer in his heyday. And yeah, I just want to mention that trade briefly. It's not like an earth-shattering, earth-shaking deal, but the reason why I wanted to mention it is because the NHL trade deadline is coming, and I think this has the potential to be quite the intriguing trade deadline, because I think you have teams in the Eastern Conference side of things. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs need to make a move for themselves if they want to make a legitimate run in the playoffs. I think the Florida Panthers, I think they believe that this could be finally the year for them, so they may make a move here to try to put themselves over the Tampa Bay Lightning. I like the Metropolitan Division, Carolina and Pittsburgh being at the top, the New York Rangers being as good as they are. I don't like some of these teams, they don't need to make a move, but will they? Because sometimes contenders make a move just to make a move. Now, sometimes that could be a mistake. Maybe this is one of those times, but I could see any teams there doing it. And in the Western Conference, I feel the exact same way. That it's such a very close race in both the Central and the Pacific for the second and third spots, and then subsequently for the wild card. I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of these middle tier teams make a couple moves starting now or closer to the deadline to try to get some momentum, because every spot is up for grabs in the Western Conference if we're being real in terms of positioning. The East, it's a little bit more tried and true. Particularly in the Atlantic, we know who the top three are as of now. Boston could make a bit of a run, but right now we know who the top three are. The Metropolitan, the top teams are the top teams. The wild card is very top heavy right now with the Capitals and the Bruins leading the way. I think the East, for the most part, the 8 teams we see in the playoff positioning now, I think is who we will see come April. But it is not the case in the West. So I would expect a lot of Western Conference teams to really start thinking and making a couple moves here. And I will get into that over the next couple of weeks, whenever we can at the start of the show. I will get into, who could end up being traded, what teams could make moves at the deadline per se, and who could potentially shake up a little bit of the power dynamic here in the NHL going into the final months of the season before we go into the playoffs. So that is my lone report, boys. Not a big one, but just a taste of what is to come and what I hope is a very active 2022 NHL trade deadline.
Beautifully said, Jurg. Beautifully said, as always. All right. That's it for hockey news. And now we move on over to the Super Bowl review. That's right. As I said earlier, Super Bowl has come and gone, and we're here to talk about it. Fellas, it was not the matchup anyone expected, nor was it the one, besides anyone from Cincinnati, wanted, but it's the one we got. And I got to say, I think this game surpassed my expectations. I kind of, hinted at it at the beginning of the episode. But I got to say, man, compared to like the last few years, this was a top-notch Super Bowl game. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of like drama coming down to the very end, this one lived up to that hype, especially kind of like you said, especially last year's. It was a blowout.
Yeah. But this one, you're right. I think the drama towards the end, it was very back and forth. Just so many big plays happen, questionable calls that we'll talk about, of course. Questionable non-calls that we also need to be talked about as well. So yeah, the Rams are your Super Bowl champions. They win it 23-20, a nail biter to say the least. So they are the kings of the NFL at the moment, guys. I'm gonna just go through some stats before we get to the nitty grits of this discussion. Matt Stafford, 26 for 40, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Cooper Kupp had 2 touchdowns. He was the Super Bowl MVP, and OBJ 1 touchdown. On the other side, Joe Burrow, 22 for 33, 263 yards, 1 touchdown. Higgins 2 touchdowns. OBJ got hurt. I think it was during the second quarter, I believe. Not sure, but it was in the first half, and turns out it was a torn ACL. That was revealed or confirmed a few days later.
I still don't think my bad. I still don't think it's necessarily been confirmed. Rappaport has tweeted about it, but there's still it feels like Odell's camp is being very secretive about what the exact injury is.
I think they're trying to be secretive because they don't want to make it seem that bad.
Agreed.
Because I think they just want him to have a chance to play. But yeah, either way, I think OBJ is going to be out till late in the season next year. I don't even know if he might play because this injury occurred at the last minute.
I think he could. I think you think of the way ACLs are now. It's they're a lot quicker to come back from.
Sports science, but the thing is, he's had
that's the second one on the same knee. That's the only reason it probably wouldn't be as quick as say someone else would.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's why the knee's already cooked. But who knows? Let's not talk about that right now. But OBJ got the touchdown. He has his ring. I think that's what everyone should focus on, and good for him. All right, so let's get to the actual game. Like we said, a thriller. Of course, this was. We all predicted, and by all I mean us three in this podcast, we all predicted that the Rams would win. Defensively, that's where we said was going to be the difference here. Defensively, they were going to cook the Bengals, and the Bengals O-line. Oh man, we'll talk about it, but yeah. It was for the Rams' taking. I think what we all hoped for was that this was going to be a close game, and we actually got our wish. And credit to the Bengals for actually making this a close game. And honestly, it was their game until the very end. It was literally theirs. And I think at the start of the second half, I was like, oh, the Rams looked like they were melting down. I'm like, holy shit, the Bengals are about to win. The momentum just shifted completely. Joe Burrow was playing a very good game, very tactical, very surgical. Nothing crazy. It wasn't going off. But again, like the second half against the Chiefs, he was playing one step at a time, not forcing anything. Awesome game by him. So yeah, guys, Rams win it. I'm going to let you guys have a free-for-all in terms of this discussion. You guys can bring up anything you want. So let me start off with Dame here. Takeaways from the game, thoughts, criticisms, comments, anything you want to talk about specifically. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Aaron Donald masterclass of defensive performance as well. I know it was between him and Kupp for MVP. I thought that was a toss-up. You could have gone either way. Both of them were heavily important. I just think a lot of people think Donald should have won it. And I get that because when the Rams weren't scoring, their defense held it down for them.
If I
And
may,
and
if I
Donald
may,
was
real
a big
quick,
reason for that. Go ahead, Jurg.
my bad. But if I may, real quick, I actually learned through an interview I was listening to, uh, the Super Bowl voters are forced to vote like before the start of the fourth quarter.
Oh, okay.
So had they waited until that final drive, I think Donald would have gotten it. I'm just saying.
That's true. But also, Cub did have a touchdown at the end
Oh
that
no, no,
won the
that's
game
true.
as
That's
well.
true. I'm just saying, like a lot of people were complaining about it. Like I heard on an interview this week, like they make the voters vote beforehand. Like they don't get to really see the full part of the
Right,
game
right.
before voting for MVP. Just so
Kind of
that there's
stupid.
context.
Okay. So some intel right there, some spicy intel. Well, yeah. But both of them deserved it. I think whoever would have won, whoever would have got it, I was deservedly so. Both of them were elite. Both of them were integral to the win here. Overall, Rams win. Dame, sorry, kind of drifted off there. Comments, concerns, criticisms, takeaways. What do you think of the game in general? All that stuff. So go ahead.
I know the last week you talked about how we need both teams kind of needed to run the ball to have a key to success in this game, and honestly, the Rams did not run the ball well at all. I know before that, like that last Cam Akers run and that last drive they had where he had like 10 yards and you got a first down inside like the 6 or something like that. Before that, they had like 17 rushes for like 25 yards or something like that with their running backs, which is absolutely god awful and not what we were talking about that they needed to win. And maybe that's why their offense is kind of struggling. But a big part of this game, a turning point, was Odell's injury because before Odell's injury, like they were hitting Odell a lot with the touchdown with that really long, like 40-yarder where he caught a slant and then just went up the field himself. And they were rolling. Like it looked like the Rams were going to win this game comfortably, kind of like some of us predicted. But then after Odell's injury, the whole Bengals defense just shifted. They all shifted towards Cooper Kupp. It was harder for them to run the ball. All these other receivers like Van Jefferson and Sadorowski, whatever his name is, couldn't get open, and Stafford couldn't find anybody. He was getting sacked. He was throwing incompletions. He just couldn't find guys. And but credit to them, they obviously turned it around at the end. Stafford just went back to old reliable Cooper Kupp and made things happen. Even when Cooper Kupp wasn't open, I know we had to see that famous clip of the no look pass to Stafford. Like when Stafford let go of that ball, Cooper Kupp was not open. He threw Cooper Kupp open, so that was extremely impressive. But as for the Rams, like I do think their defense is what won them this game because in that second half, starting out that half with the 75-yard touchdown, and then next drive, Rams Stafford comes out, throws a pick. Like after that pick, the defense for the Rams completely changed the game. They stopped into a field goal instead of a touchdown because if the Bengals go down there and score a touchdown again, back-to-back drives, like the game is looking pretty much over for them. But they get a big stop. Aaron Donald gets the big sack to hold them to a field goal, and drive after drive after drive, Rams defense made play after play with Von Miller, Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, all these guys made the plays they needed to make. And I know you mentioned the MVP. I personally think Aaron Donald should have been MVP, and the reason is not because he had the better stats, because Cooper Kupp obviously had like 90 yards with 2 touchdowns and obviously the game-winning touchdown, but just overall impact on the game. I think Aaron Donald was the game changer in this game because if it wasn't for him and him making these big-time plays to stop the Bengals offense, the Rams wouldn't get a chance to go down and get that game-winning touchdown. So in my opinion, Aaron Donald definitely should have been the Super Bowl MVP, but Cooper Kupp is definitely deserving. Something I definitely wanted to mention is Matthew Stafford and how he's viewed as a quarterback in the league. I always was a fan of Matthew Stafford. I just always thought he was in a horrible situation. But now, hopefully, people start to realize how elite of a quarterback he is. In my opinion, he's a top 5 quarterback. Now, especially with Brady out the league, it's like Mahomes, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers. I'm missing like one more person, and then I think it's Matthew Stafford. And I don't think it's really a debate. You saw what he did in the Super Bowl. Like, obviously, he didn't have an MVP performance. He didn't have his best game ever, but you saw what he did throughout the entire playoffs leading up to that Super Bowl. And the way he constructed that game-winning drive was absolutely incredible by him. And like we mentioned in last week's show, like he has been the most clutch quarterback in the fourth quarter and final drives in the entire NFL. And he's really done it throughout his whole career. Just when you're on the lines, it's hard to do when you're down 35 points going into the 2-minute warning of the fourth. So I really hope Matthew Stafford gets all the praise and credit that he deserves because he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and winning a Super Bowl in his first year with a comparable organization and good weapons and good coaching staff, like he proved that he is that. As for the Bengals side, I never thought they deserved to be here to begin with. I kind of thought they had like a little Cinderella run. I know a lot of people are talking about how Joe Burrow's young, these wide receivers are young, everyone's young, and like they'll be back. But it's really hard to do in NFL, and when you're getting your quarterback sacked 70 times a year, it's just not a recipe for success and not something that's repeatable like they did this year. So going into offseason, they're definitely obviously gonna have to improve that offensive line, which got absolutely murdered in this Super Bowl, like a lot of people predicted. Um, I know obviously a lot of credit goes to the Rams defensive line, but definitely the Bengals offensive line needs a lot of improvement. And as for Joe Burrow, like he got them there. He was what he was, but I don't think he had a elite performance either, like a lot of people expected him to do. Like I said, he needed to have like a 400-yard game, 3 or 4 touchdowns for them to have a chance in this game. Well, they obviously had a chance, but for them to win, I think that's the kind of game he needed to have. But yeah, overall, I think it was a great Super Bowl. I definitely enjoyed it. It was not one of those Rams Patriots Super Bowls that we saw a couple years ago. That was awful. It was definitely one of the best Super Bowls in the last few years. And I think both these teams definitely have a bright future. I think the Rams have an incredible shot of going back to back next year. Save that for future episodes, but I do think the Rams deserve this win. Matthew Stafford deserves all the recognition he should be getting, and we'll probably might see the Rams back here again next year.
Yeah, just to kind of echo the points you guys talked about, what I really did like about this game was that in both instances, each team had a chance to really increase the lead and to take control of the game, but the other team fought back. It was in that first half that you guys talked about. It looked like the Rams were going to run away with it, boys. And we kind of talked about how we thought, at least me and Dane felt it was going to be the Rams late in the game pulling away. Chris predicted it was going to be a blowout. And it was kind of looking like that those first couple of possessions, right? Like the Rams, they were starting to get some touchdown drives going. The Bengals looking a little bit flustered. And that was before the pass rush really got to them. Like I can tell you firsthand from like looking back, having to look back at that game at work, a lot of the pass rush in the Super Bowl came in the second half from the Rams, like in terms of really sacking and getting to Burrow. So I think you had that in the first half, and the Bengals were able to keep close. Of course, a couple mistakes by the Rams and Stafford, but at the end of the day, like you have to make the plays when they're given to you. And so the Bengals are able to keep it close. Then in the second half, the Bengals take the lead. They're looking like they get control. Like Dame said, one or two plays go different. The Bengals are able to score properly again. This game, we could maybe be talking about the ultimate Cinderella run coming to fruition, but that's not the case. The Rams were able to stay in it and came up clutch, came constantly with the pressure. I think at the end of the day, it was. I think this is a storyline. Yes, it was talked about, but I don't really think like it was focused on enough. It was the Rams going all in and how that could change the dynamic now going forward. Because the GM Snead, he even wore the shirt at the Super Bowl parade where it's like "F them draft picks." Like he does not care. He will trade however many first and second round picks and maybe even thirds it takes to ensure that this team can constantly have a chance to compete for a Super Bowl and have the top tier talent. You got Stafford there, who was acquired that way. Von Miller. Odell was more via just a regular signing, not really much of a trade, but still. And like, uh, this team is just willing to do what it takes. And I like seeing a team like that win, like them legitimately going all in. Like I like to see a team push their chips to the center of the table and say, "We want to win this. Let's go for it." They went for it, and they got it. And I'm always happy for that because you don't always get it. The teams that go all in don't always get it in this league and in all leagues. So that was something I really like to see. Kind of to Dame's point, I think both quarterbacks, when you look back at it, it was uh, just good, like good to great performances. I would teeter on great. I think Burrow, for all the pressure he had, the Bengals still had a chance to win at the very end of the game, and he tried to be as composed as he could. And I still think he was. It's just at the end of the day, when he held his knee on that one play late in the game, like
I was petrified, bro. I
I,
thought it was done.
everyone was. Like you
Oh,
saw,
that was extremely scary. Even if you're
Bro,
going for the
you
yeah.
Rams, that was
dude,
just scary. He
dude
was
was
yelling.
yelling. Yo, oh my god, dog.
Yeah, and they even cut to his family, which is like it's like oh no, but he got up, he finished the game. Like you got to give the kid a lot of credit, but like that should just hammer home the point to Cincinnati. Use every single draft pick you have on free agency and spend all the money. Use every single draft pick you have on offensive lineman in the draft and free agency. You got to get an overall alignment. But again, future episode talk. It it just showed to me that both quarterbacks were great. Like we had a lot of questions about both guys, them being inexperienced and all of that. Burrow, I think, stepped up as much as he could to the big moment, and Matthew Stafford the same. Stafford, like Dame said, when they yes, he made the mistakes, but when they needed him the most, he showed up. That the whole drive that last drive when they scored to Cooper Cup, and he still had a couple like throws there. Like he was a lot of people forget, man, he was playing with a depleted receiving core. They lost Higbee before the Super Bowl, lost Odell during the game. Like if
Yeah.
they're and Robert Woods earlier in the season. Like he did not have anywhere near his full cast of guys together. I think a lot of people forget that. And let's be real. Yes, Cam Akers tried to gut out the performance best he could, but he was hurt, man. Like he's been, I'm not convinced he's been 100% at all this entire playoff run. So I think for Stafford, it just showed to me that like to Dame's point, always believed he was a great quarterback, but Detroit is a prison sentence, and it'll make a lot of people question how good you really are. And so for Stafford to overcome everything, to make that amazing pass, which like you know how they always say it's all in the eyes. He fakes out like what was it 3 or 4 Bengals defenders on that play,
Was
like
it
every
fourth down too?
Yo,
uh
I can't even tell you how many times I've rewatched that video and Dan Orlovsky going over that video. It's so incredible.
it
Like just
is.
watching it without the analysts like describing it and then rewatching with the description. Like, oh my god, it's an amazing play.
He fakes out the entire defense. The defense, and here's the thing: you kind of mentioned it, Chris. We know Cooper Cup is going to get the ball on that final drive constantly, and yet there was nothing the Bengals defense could do to stop him. There was nothing that they could do to stop Stafford. And that amazing no-look play, like we kept talking about plays that it felt like destiny. That play felt like
Yeah.
it was time for the
Mm-hmm.
Rams to get it. Like they had to finish that drive with a touchdown. They did finish that drive with a touchdown, albeit slightly controversial. But at the end of the day, the Rams pulled it off, and Aaron Donald, the greatest defensive player of his generation, sorry, JJ Watt, came through not just with that final play where he had to force Burrow to throw the ball. The play before that, this dude was going against the offensive lineman. The running back, P. Ryan, could have gotten the first down. And Donald just reaches over the offensive lineman with his arm, pulls back P. Ryan, and then falls backwards with him. That is an amazing play. That is just absolutely outstanding. Cup Donald, to me, it's a toss of the coin. Like heads or tails, who do you want to be the Super Bowl MVP there? Because either guy, you could have made the case for both of them, just phenomenal. One guy for sure going to Canton. Another guy, he still needs to do a lot more, but he's got plenty of time to build up a little bit of a resume for himself before we can make the case for him. But overall, this team got their championship. A lot of guys' legacies got solidified with this game. I love to see it. The Rams are Super Bowl champions, and our whole podcast got it right. Let's go.
That's true. That is true. Yeah. There was some questionable calls, and there was also the questionable no call with the face mask on Jalen Ramsey. What did you guys think of that? I think that, I mean, that kind of led to, like, was it a 70-yard touchdown for
Yeah.
them? And then
Yeah.
that, I think, completely shifted the momentum. And then, of course, it was kind of an uphill battle for the Rams, and they took it at the end. But, like, what did you guys think of that no call?
If
Jurg, let me
I'm
start off with you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if I may, like everyone's saying that Ramsey constantly got torched every single play. If you take away
Yeah,
that
Chris is
40
one of
yarder
them.
from
Chris is one of
Chase,
them. Talk to
Mm-hmm.
him. Talk to him.
Talk to me.
if you take away the one catch Jamar had in the first half of 40 yards, and that call and the catch by the Bengals that resulted in that touchdown, the 70+ yarder, he had a great game. It's just it was only those 2 catches that made up for over 50% of the yards he quote unquote allowed. And the fact is, 70 of those yards shouldn't have counted. Like, Jalen Ramsey did a good job throughout that game. If you actually think Jalen Ramsey was terrible that game, you don't know what you're watching when it comes to football.
Chris,
Because Jalen Ramsey was absolutely great in that game. It was just 2 plays,
I
and
just saw him on the floor most of the time, man.
shouldn't
Sorry.
have counted. One of them should not have counted. It
he
just
probably
shouldn't
would
have.
have picked the 75-yard touchdown off if he didn't get his face mask pulled. He was in perfect position to make a play on the ball. And he
Yeah,
tore his whole face mask off. No,
I mean,
call.
I
It's crazy.
agree. I'm just saying.
I'm just
I
saying,
mean, it
like,
was an egregious no
He got
call.
beat on the Jamar Chase ball. Like it had there's no excuse for that. Like it's gonna happen. Like he got beat. Jamar Chase made a great play too, and it is what it is. But you didn't hear from him most of the game besides those 2 plays because that's how great of a cornerback he is.
I think the NFL refs, the commentators said it. They said, I think for it to be like a PI, like a face mask, the head needs to turn completely. Like it needs to
That's
turn.
that they need
Doesn't
to
matter. It's a
fix
face
this
mask.
effing
And
officiating.
I'm just saying what I've heard. I'm not saying like I'm saying this,
No,
but
you
I'm
No,
just
just
saying
missed
that.
it because the
understand it,
official's
but
behind him, so he can't see it. That's
also
why you
like
missed it.
the commentators are not the standard bearers we have. They are part of protecting the shield.
No,
This
but
is
that's
the
what they were
NFL's
told, quote
covered.
unquote.
No, this is the NFL. I'm not yelling at you, Chris. I'm just saying the NFL will cover its own ass in every single way they can, and making sure that like listen to any sport. Bro, listen to any sport. They will cover bad calls, like the national commentary. The local teams don't care. Like if you want to listen, if you want to hear officials get crucified, you got to listen to your local broadcast. Well, except the Knicks. Mike Breen, he doesn't torch anyone because he's just a really cool person. But and please get Walt Frazier off TV now.
I mean, you might. I don't even know if he'll make it, bro.
With the call itself,
All right.
with the call itself, like it's just it was so bad, and the refs knew how bad it was, and they were like, we got to make up for it, and they ended up doing that. And I'm gonna stop. I want to let Dame get his 2 cents here, and I'll gladly allow him to begin on the next call, or if Chris wants to transition that. But I'm just saying, like for a lot of the stuff that people were talking about, the Bengals offense did. The one flaw from that game is, man, that call really helped rejuvenate them. Because if they don't get that call, you cannot convince me that the Rams can't get something going there because that defense was going to start feeling
Yeah.
itself.
Absolutely. Like you're talking about the Jalen Ramsey call, right?
Yeah, the no call.
Yeah,
And if you want to talk about it, and Jurg, I'm sorry to bring this up last minute, but like also like the end of the game, like on Cooper Kupp, there were like a kind of like a plethora of like calls after like there was kind of like no calls the whole game besides.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Dame like take the main crack at that part, but I'm just saying like no makeup calls exist. Like we as a hockey fan, we learned this really hard last season because there was a official caught on a hot mic saying that he wasn't going to give the guy a call for like this, that, or the other. Like that had to do with I don't want to give them too many calls. I'll make it up at some point. Like here's the funny thing: we know that happens. It can't be out there in the open. We know that's what was going through the officials' minds on the cup. And to be fair, one of the calls on Cup, like I would argue was the defensive pass interference.
Yes.
Like one of them was. It's just like it's the other one that always sticks into people's mind, and it's because the officials, man. Like I don't understand. I've had arguments with people about this. They don't know. They just don't know what they're doing. They don't have good officials anymore. And one of the key people involved in the process of reviewing stuff and everything is Alberto Riveron, and that dude should be fired. He failed his way up. He was not a good referee. He now plays an important role when it comes to the refereeing system as a whole in the NFL. That dude should be fired, straight up. And these officials, like, there needs to be. I just don't understand. Like, they're too letter of the law. Kind of like you mentioned, it's like the head was supposed to turn. No. The guy's helmet was literally caught by the receiver. Higgins caught the ball with one hand and caught Ramsey's helmet with the other. That's a face mask. That's an offensive pass interference. What are you saying that just because this helmet didn't turn that's not a call? That is letter to the law. You know what laws and rules are made for? For interpretation. You idiots. And then they had to make the makeup calls. This game was great still. Don't get me wrong. But it sullied just a little bit because the officials can never stop getting in their own way. This was one, I'm not even joking. This is not even hyperbole. This was one of the worst overall officiated seasons the NFL has seen in quite some times. I'm not even joking. Like, it was just that bad this season.
Yeah, I mean, like you said everything needed to say. Like, obviously it was a pretty obvious call, and obviously it changed all the momentum of the game because after that you saw how hyped the offense got. The defense started to get going. Like the entire momentum of the game completely switched just off that one play call. And like whether Ramsey gets a pick or not, like it's not going to be a 75-yard touchdown. He's either going to get pass deflection, or Higgins is going to make a great play on it, and Ramsey's going to tackle him because he's not going to get obviously brought to the ground with a face mask. But for the plays at the end, I think the one on Eli Apple in the corner definitely was a PI. The only questionable one was with Logan Wilson in the middle of the field on Cooper Kupp. Now, he did hold him. It wasn't egregious like the Eli Apple one when it was. But I feel like, I don't think it was a makeup call. I just feel like it is Cooper Kupp. And when you have a linebacker on him that even holds him a little bit, you're going to get that. He's going to get that call. I said at the moment that it happened, I'm like, if this was Satoransky or Van Jefferson, I don't think they give the Rams that call. But since it is Cooper Kupp, and since he did not catch the ball, and since they got the mismatch of the linebacker on him, and he did give him a little tug with two hands, with two arms, like you could, that's where you get the call from. Like I see what the ref saw. What I would have called it, I don't know, maybe. But like I said, I think the only reason he did get it was because of the matchup that it was with the superstar receiver and the linebacker on him.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that's that. Any final comments on the Super Bowl, fellas, as we transition to the off season slash
Jets real
draft?
season.
Okay.
I will just say this, and again, Dame kind of alluded to it, and I kind of made a little bit of a comment when Chris said it last week. But Bengals fans, I know you're hyped. Let's temper expectations for next season. Let's just temper the expectation, and also to the people that are doubting and hating on the Bengals run. Now, don't you all of you start with, "Oh, but the Bengals made the Super Bowl last year. They should be a 14-win team next season." No, f all of you. Like, let's be realistic here. Regression can happen. Not everyone
Yeah.
on that team is in their
Lamar
prime.
Jackson is going to be healthy for the Bengals for the Ravens
Ravens.
this
Bengals.
year. You don't know what quarterback the Steelers are going to get. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen to the Browns. Like, their division is going to get tougher. They're going to get
If
healthier.
if the Browns get a real quarterback, that team would have made the playoffs this year. Like,
Yeah.
let's be real here. So, like, and this Bengals team has a lot of key pieces that could be free agents, right? Like at least one or two, especially on that defense. So, again, that's for future talk, more in-depth breakdown. But things change from year to year in the NFL on a consistent basis. Like last season, the Bucks keeping all 22 starters from their Super Bowl. That was the first time ever for a reason. It never happens. So let's chill with the Bengals. Like they deserve this. We could say it was a. People want to try to say it was a fluke. It was this and that. In this run, in all these one game samples, they ended up winning to make it to the biggest game of the year. And yes, they fell short. I feel bad for Joe Burrow because at the end of the day, you never know when you get back there. And everyone that's ever been to a championship in every single sport tells you the same thing: is that you never know when you get back. You never know when you get back. How many people back in the 80s saw Dan Marino and the Dolphins were going to see more Super Bowls after they made it in his second year? Burrow made it in his second year. Marino never saw a Super Bowl ever again. I don't want to curse him. I'm just saying. So let's enjoy what we saw. I hope the Bengals, and I think they will be a playoff caliber team the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, depending on if Burrow is able to keep all his body parts on him. But let's temper expectations. Let's hope the Cincinnati continues to be competitive as they are, because I think that's just good in general. But at the same time, like everyone that's going to try to like go way hard on the Bengals next season because they made it this year, like it's a new time, it's a new season. Like calm the hell down, leave the season for what it was, and move on.
All right. Good send off. All right, fellas. We move on over to more NFL news. Coaching hirings. We got some in the NFC. We got some in the AFC. Based on what Jurg has sent me, we're going to start off with the smaller sample size, which is in the NFC. 3 coaching hires: Vikings, Giants, Bears. Vikings hire Kevin O'Connell. Giants hire Brian Daboll. And Bears hire, Jurg, help me out here, Matt.
Eberflus.
There we go. And then for the AFC, we have the Texans hiring Lovie Smith, the Raiders hiring Josh McDaniels, the Jaguars hiring Doug Peterson, Dolphins hiring Mike McDaniel, and the Broncos hiring Nathaniel Hackett. Fellas, let's start with the NFC here. Jurg, let me start off with you. Actually, lead us into this. You go one by one.
All right, so we will start with what I'm going to place as my third of these 3 hires, and that will be with Matt Eberflus in the with the Chicago Bears. It's not that I don't necessarily think it's a terrible hire. I think Eberflus, he's got a couple defensive pieces that he could work with there. Khalil Mack, of course, being the big one. Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman, Eddie Jackson. There's some pieces he can work on with defense. The problem, as per usual, when you hire a defensive mind, is what offensive coordinator hire are they going to make? The number one downfall of Brian Flores' time in Miami was the fact that he could never figure out the offensive coordinator position, and he was never able to help Tua properly develop. Now, if you believe certain things have been spread recently, he probably didn't even want to begin with, and he wanted Herbert, which, let's be fair, he's actually right about that. But irregardless, when you hire a defensive guy, it's all about what offensive hire are they going to make for the offensive coordinator, right? And Eberflus, like, it's not that I don't want him to succeed. Like, I on all these hires necessarily, because I don't have a favorite team here, so I'm very much like 50-50. I'm neutral observer. I just hope Justin Fields like ends up having some success in Chicago. I really do. Like, just for his sake, they had to trade up to get him. Like, people are going to remember him as being the guy who's a bust. They're not going to remember the fact that they had Matt Nagy at the beginning of his career, who went with Andy Dalton and Nick Foles before Justin Fields, mind you. And now they're hiring a defensive first guy. I hope the offensive scheme can really improve there, because I think Justin Fields can do something, but I'm just very concerned. So I have to put it as third there, because I'm just always so bullish or bearish. I always forget which one it is properly, but I'm so down on the fact that you hire a defensive first guy for a young quarterback like Fields. Like, this offensive coordinator's hiring, this quarterback coach hiring, it better be top notch. That's all I'm saying. It better be top notch, because Fields needs it, and the future of that franchise, is dependent on it. My number 2, I'm going to go with Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings, just because they are more established. They do need a little bit of tweaking, especially on the defense. That defense continues to get another year older. But I think O'Connell's the right guy. Of course, the offensive coordinator for the now Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams officially agreed within the last, 24, 48 hours to become the Minnesota Vikings head coach. I think actually the official conference was today, if I'm not mistaken. So that's ironic. But he's got offensive toys to play with. Thielen, Jefferson, their tight end that they have, his name is escaping me. I think Irv Smith, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Irv Smith Jr. A relatively solid offensive line. Maybe need a little like tweak here or there, but it's good. And Kirk Cousins isn't the most ideal quarterback, but hey, I mean, we saw what Sean McVay could do with Jared Goff. Kirk Cousins is, at least I'll give him that he's better than Goff. So maybe O'Connell can make something happen there. I think the thing with O'Connell is he's sort of well, the reason why I put him at number 2 is because I think he's sort of in a weird transitional period, because the Vikings also have a new GM. It's like, what are they going to do with this team? Are they going to stick with veteran core for 2 to 3 more years, try to see what they can do with it? Or if things don't work out early this season, are they going to agree as an organization? We need to hit the reset button. We have a couple pieces, predominantly with Justin Jefferson on offense, and let's go from there. And hey, Justin Jefferson as your number 1 receiver, like if you end up bringing in a new quarterback of the future, like that's an amazing number 1 wide receiver for a young quarterback to have, and Irv Smith Jr. as well. So that's why I put it at number 2, because the Vikings, at least up until the very end, they were still in the playoff hunt, which I knew that they would miss out, but still the fact that they were there with all the heartbreaking losses that they had, I think that's something. And finally, Brian Daboll, I think he has made outstanding hires for his offensive and defensive coordinator guys. I think he's filled out his staff really well. I think Daboll taking this organization into the future is a good thing. My only question is, what is the team going to look like? Because I said it myself a couple weeks back. I think this team should blow it to King of the Con and beyond. I really do. But are they going to do that? Is Giants management going to allow for that to happen? Is the new GM, who also comes from Buffalo, going to do that? That's a wait and see. If they end up keeping this roster together, we already know Daniel Jones is not the guy. What do they do this year? They got 2 first-round picks to play with. I think you add that level of talent. I think this first year is for Daboll to get a sense, like, okay, who do I like on this team? Who do I not like? And I think that they have the coaching staff there to determine, what they could do. Sad part is they're probably going to have to let some pieces go because of a cap crunch. But I think Daboll, long-term, of these 3 guys, at least as of now, because of the way that he's gone about his hiring, because I think of what he could do for this team if they rebuild it properly, I have to rank him as my number 1 personally. Yeah, he helped with Josh Allen. I got to believe he's going to be able to help with the next quarterback. Yes, I keep saying the next quarterback. Daniel Jones never will be the quarterback of the future for the New York Football Giants. It just ain't happening. So we'll see what they can do. We'll see what he can do as a coach for the first time. This is a big time opportunity here. You got that time with Buffalo. It's helped you get to this point. We'll see where you go from here. Yeah, those are my personal rankings for the NFC head coach hirings. Eberflus third, O'Connell second, Daboll first of the NFC.
I have the same rankings as you do, but I'm just gonna go over my own reasonings for them. Third, I have Matt Eberflus from the Bears. They obviously hired him from the Colts, defensive coordinator. I would have rather the Bears go in an offensive kind of way, but I guess they kind of got a guy from the Colts, who the Colts are known for having a really good coaching staff, maybe to change that culture and kind of set them in the right direction, especially with a new GM and stuff. So hopefully he just hires a really good offensive coordinator and really puts a good offensive staff in that in his own coaching staff to help Justin Fields out. But personally, if I was a Bears fan, I'd definitely rather them go in an offensive kind of way. But if coming from the Colts, that's a good coaching staff. Hopefully it'll work out for them. For the Vikings, I definitely really like this hire. Because Kevin O'Connell comes from the Rams, and it's kind of like that Bill Belichick and Sean McVay coaching tree. Whoever comes out of there usually is good. More so McVay right now, honestly. Compared to Bill Belichick, but Kevin O'Connell obviously was a quarterback coach, so he worked very closely with Sean McVay. Obviously, worked with Matthew Stafford, and you saw the success Matthew Stafford had. You saw how much I really praised him in the last segment about the Super Bowl. And I think he's gonna do wonders for whoever is the quarterback of that team, whether it's Kirk Cousins or whoever they do bring in going forward. But I really like this hiring for the Vikings, offensive minded, obviously, young and coming from a really good coaching tree of Sean McVay. And last but not least, sadly, I have to say I like the Giants hiring the most. Um, I Brian Dable is a guy that I wanted the Jets to sign last year. I rather him over Robert Saleh absolutely because of what he did in the Bills organization with Josh Allen. Josh Allen, his rookie season, his second year, like you kind of saw all this inconsistent inaccuracy and all these kind of stuff, and then Brian Dable really completely changed the way Josh Allen operates as a quarterback and all the stuff that he does well now. A lot of credit goes to Brian Dable. He turned him from maybe a bust to a top 5 quarterback in the entire league. He changed his mechanics. He made him accurate now. He really puts him in the best situations to make him successful. And whoever's going to be the quarterback for the Giants, that's what you should expect with Brian Dable. I think he's going to do the absolute same thing. Like you mentioned, I don't think Daniel Jones is the quarterback moving forward. Whether they bring in a veteran, like say Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson in the trade, or they draft a guy, whether it's this year or next year, if I was a Giants fan, I'd rather just wait till next year, just throw this season in the trash and kind of rebuild and uh, trade your veteran players away for draft picks and play young players to develop because the draft class next year for quarterbacks is a lot better than this year. But combining Brian Dable with front office general manager from the Buffalo Bills, I think is a great match in heaven right there. You had both guys are gonna be on the same page because what they built in Buffalo is incredible, and they're obviously gonna be on the same page doing it for the Giants. So Giants got an incredible hire, arguably the best hire in the entire league. But that's how I rank my NFC hirings.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's all fair. I think that's how most people will when you look at it. It's just the the Vikings are going after the next young offensive guy that's next to Sean McVay. Which I mean, we're going to get to a team in the AFC that kind of did that with Kyle Shanahan here in a moment. But they're doing that. The Bears make a hire, which it could be good, could it not. The Colts have had a relatively good defense the last couple of years. Eberflus did play a key part in that. And Frank Reich did build a pretty good, coaching staff for himself there. Because Nick Sirianni was, if I'm not mistaken, he had some relations with Frank Reich, if memory serves, and then he gets hired as the Eagles coach. So he's kind of building a little bit of a coaching tree for himself there. And then finally with Dayball, kind of like you said, Dane, like helping Josh Allen fix a lot of the stuff. Like people forget how critical the development of Josh Allen was to the current quarterback that we see. And Brian Dayball, like we always ask, like, how big of a role? Like, you cannot convince me that the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator didn't help for these young guys at the beginning. So,
Absolutely.
Dave,
That's so key
yeah,
to the quarterback's development is having the right people around you to take you to that next level because they aren't superstar quarterbacks come out of college. Like they're just guys with a lot of talent and a lot of potential that aren't groomed yet. And these offensive coordinators, head coaches, quarterback coaches, all these guys that you have in the building are extremely vital to developing the quarterback the right way.
and we've seen talented quarterbacks come through and in the wrong system with the wrong coaching staff completely flame out. And who knows if they could have at least been, above average had they been in a better situation. So, and we clearly saw like Dayball and McDermott were given this young QB, nurtured him. It was some growing pains in that first year, still some mistakes in the second. And they've seen now the last 2 seasons, bad game here and there, but Josh Allen is an all world top 5 quarterback in this league, and they played a role in that. I think a lot of people for some reason like to forget that part when it comes to Allen, but it's just the God's honest truth. So yeah.
Dame, let me start off with you on this one since you started off with Jurg. AFC coaches, and I just mentioned them. Do you want me to repeat them for you, or
No, I got it. It's
okay?
nah,
You can go whatever
yeah,
order you
I
want in
got
terms of like what you want to talk about.
I'm just gonna go 5-1, same way we went with the NFC. I'm just gonna this is good. The 5 is gonna be brief. It's the Texans with Lovie Smith. The Texans are just a debacle of a franchise, and they just went the wrong way. They had Brian Flores in for an interview, and a lot of people thought they were gonna hire him, and they just went with Lovie Smith, the guy who's not been that great of a head coach throughout his career. He's had a proven track record of not being a winning head coach, and bringing him into the Texans roster that's not good at all. I just don't understand it. So I'm just not going to talk about the Texans a lot. Right after him at number 4, I'm going to go with the Broncos. Uh, I don't know. I just feel like this was just a move to kind of get Aaron Rodgers there and help their influence of getting Aaron Rodgers there in Denver, because he was the quarterback coach of the Packers, correct? Or is it offensive coordinator? I
My
think he was a
bad.
quarterbacks coach.
Hackett? Yeah, I think it was the QB coach. I
Okay,
don't think he
yeah.
was the
I
offensive
mean, I
coordinator.
think there was a lot more options out there for them. I do like that they went in an offensive kind of way, but I do think this has a lot to do with Aaron Rodgers. And if Aaron Rodgers does not go there, I think who knows how it's going to work out for them. Maybe their master plan kind of fails, but hopefully it does work out. Like I said, you can't go wrong, but it's better to take a risk on an offensive guy who came from Matt LaFleur than go with a defensive guy, old loser like Lovie Smith. Then I'm gonna go with Josh McDaniels of the Raiders. I do really like this hire, and Josh McDaniels has obviously been a candidate for a lot of head coaching jobs in the past. He obviously accepted a coach job a couple years ago and then kind of backed out of it. But a reason being why he was a candidate for a lot of these jobs is because of Tom Brady and the offense that he ran there for him, and him being successful in his older ages. But then after obviously Tom Brady leaves, a lot of teams wanted to see what he did without him. And obviously Mac Jones, who's not the most talented quarterback, was a 5th quarterback taken in this year's draft. It was extremely impressive the offense he led for Mac Jones and how impressive they were after Tom Brady leaving. Without any top receivers, their offensive line is obviously great. That running game was fantastic. A lot of credit goes to Josh McDaniels. And hopefully he does the same thing for the Raiders, because I do think Derek Carr is a very underrated quarterback, and they do have a running game there with Josh Jacobs. They obviously are going to need to add receivers, but he didn't have any receivers in New England, and he made it work. And that offensive line is definitely going to need work, because compared to the Patriots, who had one of the best offensive lines in the league, the Raiders absolutely do not. So this offseason, the Raiders are definitely going to have to work on that wide receiving core and the offensive line. But I do like Josh McDaniels as that hire. I think he's very creative. And I think he's learned a lot from coaching Tom Brady in the past. Then I'm going to go with Mike McDaniel of the Dolphins. He obviously came from the 49ers, another coaching tree like Sean McVay and Bill Belichick that with Kyle Shanahan, that a lot of teams are training towards because they really like the way that offense works. You saw with the Jets, obviously Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator of the Niners, and then Robert Saleh took Michael Floor, I believe, to be his offensive coordinator. And then you see that now with Mike McDaniel. I think he's going to get very creative with this offense, because just like in San Francisco, Tua might not be a top 5 quarterback, top 10 quarterback, and might not be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but he's an average quarterback that should be able to get the job done if he has the right coaching and the right talent around him, kind of like Jimmy G did. And you made a Super Bowl, you made an NFC Championship. Like, you could say that 49er system got the best out of Jimmy G, and now bringing a guy like Mike McDaniel in from that system, you're kind of hoping for the same with Tua, who I think personally has a lot more talent than Jimmy G. So hopefully they simplify that offense for them, get a running back, get an offensive line, and kind of run that same system that they did with the 49ers and lead them to success. And the hiring that I think is the best in the entire league, even with better than the Giants of Brian Dable, is Doug Peterson of the Jaguars. I think Doug Peterson was the best candidate out there. And obviously the Jaguars are an absolute debacle. But with Doug Peterson, not only do you bring in an offensive mind, but you bring in a guy who could really change that culture around. He's obviously a Super Bowl winning coach, and he won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles as his quarterback. So I can only imagine what you could possibly do with Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, they need a lot of work done both on the offensive end and defensive end. But bringing a guy like Doug Peterson, who has really strong leadership and has a track record of being a Super Bowl winning head coach with not the greatest talent around him, I think is going to be absolutely vital to his team's success. And that's how I rank my AFC head coaching hires.
I did not expect. I did not expect the Jacksonville Jaguars to take number 1 in Dame's hires. I did not expect that. Okay, this makes it interesting. Um, so let's go straight into mine. So very similar off the top. My number 5 is Texans with Lovie Smith. I think at this point he's just there to be yet another transition guy, which is like, why did they fire Cully in the first place then if this is where they were going to go? But to each his own. Then again, I think they were scared out of hiring Josh McDaniels considering exterior circumstances. But we'll just go with him at number 5. Like this is third go around. Like I feel bad for the guy. I really do think it's more for optics per se. But let's see if he can at least fix the culture. I think that team is kind of toxic right now. I think they need to fix a lot of things in that organization. I think Lovie Smith can at least help that. He's a steady hand, right? He's a steady hand, worst case scenario. And I think for hiring a transition head coach, like I think that's what you could ask for. Just a steady voice in the locker room. The guys respect him. He was there last season, so I'll go with him in number 5 through no fault of his own, really. Number 4, sticking with Dames here, Nathaniel Hackett. It's on me. He was actually the offensive coordinator the last 2 seasons. My mistake for misremembering the position. He played a role, of course. Rodgers talked about how he made it as a joke. It's like if Hackett goes, then he goes. And I think Dame hit it on the head. I think that's predominantly what they hope. They hope that Aaron Rodgers and the Packers do eventually say like no dice here anymore, and that he ends up leaving. And of course, Denver has been a team that many have talked about him going there. There is some talent there, and Hackett being the head coach there, there's a guy he has rapport with, he has a good relationship with, all things that we know of from our vantage point. I think Hackett in and of itself was a good enough hire, going the right mind with offensive minded coach. Like a guy like Hackett's going to get his opportunity at some point, right? Like he will. And now let's see what they do. If they do end up getting Rodgers, of course, that very much helps things early on for Hackett in his tenure, and you'll still have some growing pains, but here you have a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback to kind of help make up for it a little bit, and he can vouch for like that. Rodgers is a guy who, if he vouches for Hackett, the locker room will listen. So I think you get a respected voice there. My number 3 is Doug Peterson, actually, because I definitely understand the final season. Looking back, I don't think it was his fault in any way. I think Eagles management wholly made a mess of that situation. Carson Wentz, it was just an implosion, unlike what we've ever seen. Probably the only thing coming closest to it would be Carson Wentz in this season, that final game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, funny enough. But I think the last year I don't count against him. However, a lot of people forget between the Super Bowl and his last year, there were still 2 more seasons with that team, 9-7. Now, yes, Nick Foles was the starting quarterback for that Eagles Super Bowl team. Yes, he's not that great of a quarterback, as we saw after the run. I fully agree there. But that team still had some very good players on it, including Jason Peters and Lane Johnson on the offense. Fletcher Cox defensively being one of the best defensive tackles in the game. We don't really talk about because Aaron Donald exists. Like there were some very talented players on that Eagles Super Bowl team. I'm just saying. So like I hate to Zach Ertz as well. Like there was talent there. So that's the only part I disagree with Dame. It's like he didn't win with talent. They won with talent. They had a fierce front four. They had one of the best offensive lines in the game that season. They had a healthy running game that was, just attacking, opposing rushing defenses. Like the Eagles are a little bit better, I think, than most people give them credit for, especially because they ended up figuring out the Patriots in that Super Bowl. But in between that Super Bowl and that last season, they had 2 9-7 seasons. All I'm saying, anything is better than Urban Meyer at this point. I will give Doug Peterson credit. I think he could be the guy to at least help Lawrence get past last season, because I think last year was really that bad for Trevor. I think Doug Peterson can help instill some confidence back in him. I do think he is a good offensive mind, but I'm not super high because it's not the last season in Philly for me. It's those 2 after the Super Bowl that kind of like, and it's like, man, I've seen mediocre coaches with Super Bowl rings get second chances. So Doug, I hope for his sake, I hope for Trevor Lawrence's sake, that's not what's happening here. I hope it's like he's getting the second chance because he really, really does deserve it, and not just because there's a ring on his resume. So all I'm going to say there. My number 2 is Josh McDaniels. I think the same thing with Dame. I think he could really help things out offensively. I think he's learned a lot when he returned back to Belichick and Brady when he initially took the Colts job and then reneged at the very last second. McDaniels being back in New England and then working with different quarterbacks as well, because he worked a little bit with Cam Newton, got to work now with Mac Jones. Now he gets a guy in Derek Carr who is a step above. Like if Mac Jones becomes what Derek Carr is, I think Belichick and them would be happy, to say the least. He gets to work with him. Some intriguing weapons on the team. I think this needs to be the offseason where they kind of rebuild, because remember, they tore apart the offensive line last offseason. They lost a wide receiver earlier this year due to, off the field circumstances. So like the Raiders need to really rebuild things there. But I think McDaniels could be the guy, and he has some head coaching experience. And I think, second go around, he should be way, way more ready for the challenges coming his way now that things finished up with how things finished up in Denver. He got to go back to Belichick, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my last one, my number one, is Mike McDaniel. I think this team needed to go for an offensive mind after, like I said earlier in the pod, the Brian Flores' biggest flaw was that he couldn't get the offense going. I think McDaniel has shown early on he's a guy that can help in that endeavor. I think he's smart. I think he played a critical role in regards to some of the success that they had, like him coming now from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. He can scheme up a run game, and the Dolphins need to improve in that running game. They need a couple new guys in there because the running back core was just atrocious last season. But I think offensive line wise, they were a really young offensive line these last 2 years. And you bring in a guy that has experience with helping scheme the offensive line to get these running plays, who worked with a guy like Kyle Shanahan, which the Shanahan tree is known for for getting running backs going. I think that's a match made in heaven there. I think a young guy who wants to work with Tua, I think that's the biggest thing. We know Flores and Tua. Say what you will about how he got fired in if he shouldn't have been fired or not. We know Brian Flores and Tua didn't necessarily get along. I think a guy that wants to now work with Tua, I think is a big deal for Tua's confidence, for what he could do. I think he's going to really help scheme things around Tua. Tua, I think, has a relatively good arm. He's a pretty accurate quarterback. I think having a guy like McDaniel there is going to be big. And just the new things he can make to the offense. I think he can get the best out of Jalen Waddle. I think, he worked with a George Kittle, right? So now he has a Mike Gesicki who's still not as good as Kittle, but he's in that next tier to me of tight ends. Like to me, the top three, I think we all agree it's like Kelsey, Kittle, Waller. I think Gesicki is in that next tier, honestly. And so you got an offensive freak there. Again, that offensive line was just so young these last 2 years, man. Like they've been drafting guys recently. I think this is the guy to help get that running game going. And then defensively, I think, there's some talent there. The Dolphins defense during that winning streak was the reason they were getting W's. If he could, if he has the right hire, if they run the right schemes, add a piece or two here and there, because I think they do need at least a little bit more pass rush per se. I think the Dolphins, it's money for them on this hire. I think this was the guy that this organization needed. Did they want him? Probably not. I think Stephen Ross had his ideal candidate in mind, but his guy ended up, not going back to the NFL. And this was without question the next best guy. And hey, Mike McDaniel, I think this is a big opportunity for him. He gets this chance now to work. I think I was confusing Hackett and McDaniel. McDaniel was the quarterback's coach because he's in the booth for a lot of games. The offensive coordinator would be down on the field. But yeah, this was big time hire, big time move, I think, for the Dolphins. If I had to give the best of the hires, as I have with ranking them number one, I think the Dolphins hire here of McDaniel has been the best overall of the offseason, in my opinion.
All right, masterfully said by both of you fellas, and I believe that's the end of the episode. Jurg and Dame, as always, thank you for your expert analysis here, because you guys hit it out the park, like you always do. It's constant. Sun is hot, basically. Jurg, where can they find us on the socials?
You already know you can follow us at SomeWhat.Sports on Instagram. Yes, the season's over. It's sad, but don't worry. Still going to be some activity there. The other sports are still going on. Have some nightly occurrings, maybe a couple polls here and there, some posts, of course. It's all good, fellas. It's all good. The Somewhat Sports Podcast is going to keep things rolling on Instagram. And, of course, here on YouTube when you are listening to us right now. You are obviously hearing us at this moment. You got to keep on going. Go back through the videos. Search through all the amazing stuff we've done. Heck, if you want a preview of the amazing work to come, remember, in just, 2 months' time, boys, it's NFL draft season.
Oof, my favorite.
It's that magical time of the year. If you think the Super Bowl gets the show hype, no, you haven't seen it yet, boys, with the drafts coming up here in a bit. So keep in tune to that. Of course, still a ways away, but it's never too early to start planning out. And make sure that the Somewhat Sports Podcast is at the top of your listening list throughout the entire year.
Wow. Just beautifully put as always, Jurg. Running through walls always for you. All right, so that'll be it. Jurg and Dame, thank you, as always, for doing your thing. To all the listeners listening, if you made it this far, we appreciate the life out of you. And until next time, peace.